It's a great honor and a privilege to introduce Arnold Robbins. Here we are in North Ireland. Aaron, can I ask, you've been in Israel over 20 years,
Right. We made Aliyah a little over 21 years ago.
but you were born in the States.
I was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. My wife was born and raised in Seattle, Washington. And we made Aliyah about 7 years after we got married.
Okay. And your parents, were they born in
My
America?
parents were also born in the States. My father is from Savannah, Georgia. My mother is from Jacksonville, Florida. Um,
Southerners.
so we're definitely Southerners. My father's mother was the youngest of eight or nine or however many, and she was born in the States. All the rest of her siblings,
Oh, so you go back many generations
well,
in the
three.
States.
So and
And
the rest
your
were
great
born in
grandparents?
all. They came over from Europe, Lithuania, Poland. Um, they came to the South. Although I think my grandfather first came to New York and then later moved south where he had an uncle. So so we, all my family was in the South, and we visited relatives in Savannah and in Jacksonville mostly. My mother had an aunt that lived in Thomasville, Georgia, which is way south Georgia. Um, my aunt, her aunt and uncle. I remember being told that he used to chef his own meat, and because it was a little tiny town, it did have a shul, but not a whole lot of Jews, and so they chefed their own meat. Um, and I remember also that they had a black lady that worked for them, and my aunt telling a joke my great aunt telling a joke in Yiddish, and the black lady laughing, and I was a teenager or 12, 13, whatever, and I'm going, how does she understand Yiddish? But she worked for them for 40 years, so she
She
picked
picked it
up the
up.
Yiddish and understood the joke. Um, so so yeah, I was
And
definitely
you
from
grew
the
up
South.
in Atlanta.
I grew up in Atlanta. So Atlanta is a city. It's much more cosmopolitan and somewhat less deep south culturally. Although in a lot of ways it's still very southern in terms of slower pace of life, politeness, southern values. In retrospect, I picked up a lot of the southern values, even though I went to Jewish day schools. Um,
And was your family religious? Was it Orthodox?
Family was conservative, traditional. We joined Beth Jacob, which was the Orthodox shul in Atlanta. Basically, when my father had to start saying Kaddish for his mother, I was 4 or 5. So they moved to Beth Jacob, and that's where we went to shul. So we went Friday night, Shabbos morning. But my parents sent us to the Hebrew Academy, which was the Jewish day school, and then later I was in the third class to enter the Yeshiva High School in Atlanta, which was the first, Orthodox Jewish high school. So Jewish education was very important to my parents. They gave us Jewish education, and so we kept a kosher home, lit Shabbos candles, um, and then as I was going through high school, I kind of became more religious, and my own observance solidified and became more orthodox. That helped shift some of what the family did.
Did you ever encounter any anti-Semitism growing up?
Not particularly, but it's fairly isolated, living in a Jewish
Most of
community,
your
and
friends were from your school,
yeah, from school. Yeah,
but you mixed with the general population. Did you have any non-Jewish friends growing up?
no.
And was it in Jewish areas? Were there specific Jewish areas where you lived?
Yeah, we lived 10 minutes walk from Bet Jacob, and that area has became more and more Orthodox over time. There were a lot of Jewish people there anyway, but it became more and more Orthodox as Atlanta grew. So a lot of Orthodox people moved to Atlanta, and then they wanted to be walking distance from
The
the
cemetery?
shul, and
Yeah.
there was really only at the time the one Orthodox shul. So people, the neighborhood became more and more Orthodox, and that's continued. I mean, when I go back to visit, after having been away for 20, 21 years, I see so many people walking around, no clue who they are. It's like walking around in Baltimore. You know, you just see all these women with their hair covered and strollers and.
When you grew up, it wasn't like that.
No, not at all. I remember even when I was home in the summertime from college, you know, having to make phone calls to get a minyan for mincha.
Wow.
And Maariv. So
there's a lot of South Africans that have actually come to Atlanta as well today.
That's true.
There's
There are
a
South
big
Africans.
community.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a number of shuls, a number of different areas. I think the South Africans are less in the Beth Jacob area, but I don't really know for sure.
And what made you went to Yeshiva University?
So my 12th grade year, the school was very small and really didn't have a program. So I did a joint enrollment program where I was in high school and in college at Emory University. And like twice a week I went to high school to yeshiva and learned Gemara with my Rebbe. And that's really where a lot of it, you know, really clicked. And he pushed me very hard to go to Yeshiva University for
Who
college.
was your Rebbe?
Rabbi Daniel S. Streicher. Absolutely amazing people.
He had a
Amazing,
tremendous influence.
Yeah. So I went to Yeshiva University for my first year. And then there were all these people there that had been in Israel, and when I was hearing how great Israel was and studying in yeshiva and things like that. And in the meantime, at YU, you had a lot of people who were pushing, who just, you know, studying very hard, got to get grades. They all wanted to be doctors and lawyers, and they were just, you know, heads down studying. And so after a year of that, I was kind of tired of school and tired of grades and being tested, and I decided I want to do something more lishma. And so I went to yeshiva in Israel. I went to a place no longer there. It's called BMT, Beit Midrash Torah, which people of my generation know of. And that was a very good experience. The yeshiva was run by the Sachnut. It was basically all B'nai Chutz La'aretz, people from the state, mostly from the States, some South Africans, Australians, English, whatever. But most of the classes were given in Hebrew. And so we were forced to learn Hebrew and to function in Hebrew. And it happened, so my first year in YU, I'd taken, as part of the curriculum, I'd taken a year of Hebrew language, which was essentially Hebrew grammar with some vocabulary. So having had all the grammar kind of beat into me and in my subconscious, and then being in Israel and having to, you know, listen to Hebrew, speak Hebrew, read Hebrew, kind of all clicked. And even though I'd had like 12 years of Jewish education, I, you know, can read the words in the siddur, but I really didn't know what I was saying, right, other than looking at a translation. And then after having been through that, I started understanding Hebrew, speaking Hebrew, which was a lot of fun, which was really great, because Hebrew is a beautiful language. And so at that point, you know, the Hebrew all clicked and the learning accelerated and so on and so forth. The other thing about BMT was, because it was run by the Sachnut, was that it was very focused on Zionism and Eretz Yisrael and making Aliyah, and they kind of constantly hit you over the head with a hammer. And at the time, it's like I really didn't enjoy it, but it took. And after, I actually went back for a second year, because I'd heard really wonderful things about the Rav who taught the second year, Rav David Miller, and he really was absolutely amazing Rebbe. And the second year, you know, just so much more than the first year. The second year was worth several years of the learning of the first year. So it all clicked, and at that point I realized that, you know, Israel's really where the future is for the Jewish people, and this is where I want to raise my kids, and so on and so forth. So that's where the Aliyah bug bit me, so to speak. So I went back to YU. I finished up at YU. I promised my parents that if they let me stay for the second year, I'd go back and finish my degree. So I went back to finished up at YU.
Can I just ask, when you were at YU, were you close with Rabbi Soloveitchik or Norman Lamb and Rabbi Tendler?
No. So I actually, my second year I was in Rabbi Tendler's share. I don't really think I appreciate him, but at least I was able to follow him for the most part and take notes and so on. He usually had interesting stories occasionally about helping his father-in-law write chuvas and things like that.
Moshe Feinstein for our listeners out there.
Right. So, which was interesting to me that Rav Moshe had people helping him write chuvas, because I would have never thought about that. But I guess Rav Tendler did, probably some of his sons did, I don't really know. The Rav gave a shiur a few times a week. It was packed, but that was really for the people that were at the top of the game, really the top-notch yeshiva students.
But anybody could attend the Rav shiur?
Well, if you were assigned to a shiur, you were supposed to be in your shiur, right? Not in the Rav shiur. And the room was packed. So it was the people that were in the Rav shiur were in the Rav shiur. Some of the Rebbeim would go and listen to the Rav shiur. He occasionally gave public shiurim, but at that point he was, he was elderly, and playing with my ring. And he, even with a microphone, it was hard to understand him and hard to follow him, and particularly in a noisy auditorium. So
And it was given in English or Yiddish?
Yeah, in English. At that point, he was giving shiurim in English, and had been for a while. Nobody spoke Yiddish. Who spoke Yiddish? Anybody my age, it would be very rare that somebody my age, particularly growing up outside New York, but even, not in a Hasidic community, you wouldn't be speaking Yiddish. Your parents spoke Yiddish to their parents.
You could understand a little bit?
Not really. I wouldn't say I understood any Yiddish. There are a few words you picked up. Mm-hmm. Right, Gewalt, and but occasionally my parents would speak Yiddish to each other when they didn't want us to understand, right, when we were little. But nobody, my generation, spoke Yiddish, and I never saw any reason to speak Yiddish. Mm-hmm. So anyway, the Rav gave shiur in English, and there were other Rebbeim also of that generation that when people didn't understand Yiddish, so they switched to giving shiurim in Hebrew. Trying to remember. Don't remember a name right now. It'll come to me. But the ones right below the Rav, there were 2 or 3, and they gave also Talmidei Chachamim Dolim. But so if they didn't want to speak in English, they gave shiurim in Hebrew.
And do you remember, were there many visiting Rabbonim that would come to Yeshiva University that would give public lectures or public shiurim?
Not that I remember. Not really that I remember.
And your experience at Yeshiva University, was it a very positive experience? Were you encouraged to question, to explore different? You could ask what you wanted. You could.
Oh yeah, that was certainly true. I was in the yeshiva program as opposed to the program that was more for Bali Tshuva. So I was in the program that was really, where you're already not really doing that stuff. Yeah. But when I was in yeshiva here, I did also did some studied some philosophical sources and things like that. BMT really was not your standard yeshiva in that it wasn't just Gemara. It was Gemara and philosophy and Navi and Mishnah and history, and so you got exposed to a number of topics in Jewish education, which was really actually very good for me. And instead of just banging on Gemara 9 hours a day.
And what secular subjects did you study at Yeshiva University?
So I studied computer science. They had you had the standard courses you had to take, art and music and speech and 1 or 2 other things that were standard because it was a liberal arts college. English and maybe some history and things like that. But my major was computer science.
And what years are we talking about?
So there were 4 years, 2 at YU, on the outside 2 in yeshiva, 78 to 81.
So this is really the beginning of the computer science. Well,
computer science was established.
But here it's moving it's becoming much more popular.
Yeah, it wasn't yet, hugely popular.
Yeah.
What you're talking about is mainly you're talking about mainframes and mini computers. The microcomputer revolution was just starting. That's 81 was your Tandy TRS-80 with a cassette tape for storage, and
That's right.
when microcomputers were, if you were studying computer science, those things look like toys. It's like comparing a Harley Davidson
Yeah.
to the bicycle you buy for your 6-year-old, right? It's
That's
just
true.
you see the resemblance, but somebody who's used to a Harley isn't going to get
Yeah.
down on the little bicycle for the 10-year-old.
And Aaron, what instilled your passion for computer science or your interest in computer science?
So in 11th grade or so, the high school arranged for some vocational testing, and one of the things they said was, well, you might be good at computers. So I took some computer classes in 12th grade at Emory and enjoyed it, and just decided to keep going with it. Um, I still enjoy software development. It's a lot of fun getting the computer to do what you want it to do.
And at Yeshiva University, was it did they have prominent lecturers in the field?
I wouldn't call them prominent. They taught the courses. Some of the professors were adjunct professors. They came from other places, but they gave a decent degree. And then it was an okay degree. When I finished YU, I had enough of New Yorkers and being up north in the cold and whatever, and I'd been away from home. I decided to go back home, and I applied to Georgia Tech for grad school, and I did a master's in information and computer science at Georgia Tech. And professionally, I'd say that was a lot more influential in terms of a lot of things I studied and did, and things like that. It was nice being back home and being able to be helpful around the house. And Georgia Tech was a reasonable place to go to school.
Were there any other religious Jewish students there?
No. Today it's different, but there was one person on the faculty who was an Orthodox member of our shul, but when he was on campus, he didn't wear kippah. I wore kippah.
You wore kippah?
Yeah, I wore kippah. People would ask questions, generally polite, interested questions. I didn't have any problems. As far as I know, I think I'm the only person that I know of that is an alumnus, whatever the word is,
Alumni?
a graduate of that combination of schools, the Yeshiva University and Georgia Tech. But today you do have you've got a big Chabad presence at Georgia Tech, and there are more Orthodox and kids from Atlanta going to Georgia Tech and so on and so on.
Aaron, can I ask, because it's very similar to the South Africa situation, if there was an exam on a Yontef, or if there were courses that were taken on...
I didn't go.
Or if there was an exam, would they change it for you? Were they very accommodating?
So I don't remember that it actually was an issue. I don't remember that something like that came up where I had to deal with that. I would have gone and talked to the professor and explained, and I suspect that some kind of arrangement would have been made.
But they were very accommodating.
Yeah. Again, I don't remember that I ever missed an exam because of Yom Tov. Okay. Nothing was ever done on Shabbos anyway, because Saturday is day off. And I might have missed a few classes because of Yom Tov. So you miss a few classes and you find somebody and copy some notes or whatever. Particularly in grad school, the classes were small. So you can, between 20 odd people in a class. It's not a 200 people lecture. So that gave me an opportunity to get to know some professors because the classes were small. And so I interact with them.
And you never had any anti-Semitism or anti-Jewish feeling?
No. Once in a while, there was one secretary who wanted to try to talk to me about Christianity, and it's like, well, don't you think if there's something out there you ought to explore? It's like, no, I'm happy. She got the message and stopped bugging me. If she'd kept bugging me, I would have complain to somebody, but she stopped. So.
Can I just ask, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners would be fascinated to hear, did you ever experience or did you ever see anti-black or, you hear the Deep South, or was there any racism towards non-whites that you ever encountered or that you witnessed?
Not particularly, but again, I grew up in a different part of town. And so, I remember a lot of that going on and seeing it on the news and so on, but I was very young, right? The late 60s when all that stuff, late 60s, early 70s when all that was happening, I was, between 9 and 12 years old. I was a kid. So, but it wasn't like I had black neighbors with people burning crosses on their yards or anything. So.
And at the college and the university, was it integrated?
Yeah.
So you had black students there as well? And
yeah.
There was no segregation? There was no...
No, there was no segregation. There were not a lot of black students, but there were definitely black students. Segregation had ended, way before I was in college. So.
Okay. And after you graduated...
So after I graduated, I actually went to work at Georgia Tech for a couple of years, and then and in the School of Computer Science, they had a lab with computers, keeping the lab and the computers running. Did that for a couple of years, and then after that, I went to work at Emory University as a system administrator in their computing center, running some systems. At the time, Unix systems were becoming more popular, particularly in universities, and there wasn't a lot of people with the Unix experience and the ability to run the systems. So it was pretty straightforward to get a job and feel appreciated. The computing center at Emory was a little bit more of a formal place. I wore a tie most of the time, even if I loosened it. They came from a mainframe culture, this IBM culture, and the IBM culture was suits and ties and more formal and so on, and not so academic like a school of computer science or the academic side of Emory. But the computing center served all these other parts of the campus, and things were a little bit more formal. But that was good. I learned a lot about running systems, and that was when the internet didn't quite exist yet, but the National Science Foundation was funding NSFNet, which is where they were starting to connect universities using the internet protocols and to the existing ARPANET. So Georgia Tech was connected, and then we got a connection with an X25 line to Georgia Tech. That's how we got connected. So I was involved with that and setting up the domain name system and at Emory, because that was sort of when we switched. That was about when the switch happened to the domain name system. It was the early-ish 80s, 83, 84, no, 80, that's not right, 84, 85, 86. I'm getting it wrong. I went to work at Emory about 85, 86, so it's the late 80s. And then, and it was while I was working at Emory that I started going out on shidduchim, flying to New York and other places. And let's see, 89 is when I met my wife. I've been working at Emory for a couple of years. She was living in Philadelphia, and so I met my wife. And we dated for about 6 months before we got engaged, and then we got married in 1990. And so about shortly after we got married, or shortly before actually, I went to work at a startup company in Atlanta, which didn't last very long. It lasted a little over a year, maybe 2 years. Like many startup companies, you work your tail off and have nothing to show for it afterwards.
It must have given you a lot of experience.
It gave me a lot of experience. I did some nice work, but the company itself didn't continue on and ran out of money to pay me and so on and so forth. After the first company, I went back to Georgia Tech, but what I was doing was teaching continuing education classes in Unix, C, networking, those kinds of things, where people would, professional people that are working come to take a class for somewhere between 1 and 4 days, depending on what the topics are. And that was fun. I enjoyed teaching. So standing up in front of a class, teaching, helping people learn, go through labs, and seeing the light bulb go on, and so on and so forth. It was a lot of fun. So that was our first two kids. It was about 5 years, but I wanted to get back into software development because I felt like I've been teaching the same thing, and I wasn't really growing for myself. And so I went to another startup company, and that was just as bad or worse. So after I'd been there for a while, me and my wife and I, we'd been talking about Aliyah. It was at that point we took a month off, came to Israel, rented an apartment, and just saw what it was like to live here day to day, right? Because my wife goes, "You are a yeshiva student, you're in a dorm, you don't know what it's like to live here. You got to go and live in an apartment, for real, day to day stuff."
And which city were you in?
So we were in Yerushalayim.
Okay.
Some friends of mine agreed to rent us their apartment, and they moved out for a month. And so we rode around on buses and stuffed the babies on the buses and went back and forth. And at that point, my wife felt like, okay, we can do this. Maybe that was right before I got this second job. Yeah, that was before I got this. I was still at Georgia Tech. We came to Israel. We came back. I decided I wanted to try to get a job where maybe I could learn something about Windows and developing software on Windows, because I'd been doing nothing but Unix, and Windows was up and coming, and that looked like I should. So
You felt that was going to be the future?
Well, I felt like it would be worth knowing, just, if in case that's the way the world went, then I should get some experience. So we kind of said, okay, we'll make Aliyah as soon as you, can learn some new stuff. And like within a week, I'd gotten the job offer for the next job. So it was like, we felt like, Mina Shemayim. And so I went to this other job, but I actually didn't get to learn any Windows. So I was there for about a year or two, including 96, which was when the Olympics were in Atlanta. So it was a busy time. And so they also ran out of money to pay me. And so at that point, instead of looking for another job, we just said, let's just pick up and go. So we started with the Aliyah plans, and I think we actually had been thinking about it anyway, because if I remember correctly, we made a pilot trip for like a week, 2 weeks actually before all that happened. But that was the motivation to just come.
And you came, you went through the Aliyah department?
Yeah, we made Aliyah, we used a group called Tehillah for our pilot trip. We did the regular thing for Aliyah. That was before Nefesh B'Nefesh.
You were on the Mechaz Klita?
We went to Merkaz Klita in Ra'anana. We were there for about 9 months.
Many South Africans there as well?
Right, yeah, so we met a few.
Okay. And it's a very nice Mechaz Klita.
It was, it really was. It was.
And it's an easy absorption.
It really was. On our pilot trip, we heard a lot about it, and that's really, after the pilot trip, that's how we decided to do that. And it really was very good, because there were ganim within walking distance. There was a gan on the premises. So we had our son by then. He was a year old. So it really was the right, and the Ulpan was right there. So it really was the right thing for us. And
did you make from the community many friends?
Not really from the
community.
Not really from the community. There wasn't a whole lot of interaction between the Merkaz Klita and the community, but we made friends in the Merkaz Klita, other people that made Aliyah, and that we're in touch with still. We on Hanukkah have a get together. people from the Merkaz Klita.
And it's nice that they've stayed in Israel.
Yeah.
So
So a
it's-
few went back, a few came back, you know. But overall, many of them stayed, and we're in touch with them.
And did you find the job easily after you being on the Merkaz Klita?
So before we made Aliyah, I'd gotten involved in writing, and I'd revised one book for O'Reilly, which is a big technical publisher. And that's a bit of a story. We'll get into that story, I guess, in the second half of the interview. But it's like, okay, I did the work, and then, oh, money, wow. And it was, at the time, a fair amount of money. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go make Aliyah. I'm not going to get a job right away. Maybe I can revise some books. I'll take a laptop, and I'm not doing work on more book revisions. And so I arranged to do 2 more book revisions. And so I did that while we were in the Merkaz Klita, and then afterwards. And and the money was actually quite good. So I just decided, after interviewing, and at the time startup companies here were like in the States, where they wanted, you know, expected 60-hour weeks or 80-hour weeks, and I just didn't want to do that anymore. So I said, maybe we can just make a living writing books. And I did that for several years until the first internet bubble burst, and then but for like 5-6 years I did that, and we lived off of that. So I was independent.
And these books were sold worldwide?
Yeah. A number of them were translated as well, which is kind of neat to get a copy of a book and you
And your name's
see your
on it?
name on it,
Oh.
and the rest of it's Chinese, but or French or German.
That's wonderful.
So I did that for several years, and then eventually I had to go to work, you know, go and get a real job.
And from Renanda, where did you decide to live?
So we decided to take another look here. We initially thought we'd go someplace that was more mixed, dati, non-dati, whatever. After being in Ra'anana, where on Friday night there's cars zooming by and people blaring their stereos and whatever, it's like, maybe we should go look at a dati issue. And so we looked, so we'd seen No Fly Alone on our pilot trip, and we decided to come look here. We looked at Modi'in, and I think there was one other place that we looked at seriously, and we ended up deciding to try out here. So we rented a house initially for a year or two, and then after we'd been here a year or two, we decided we wanted to stay. So we were actually able to buy this plot of land, and then we went through the process of building a house.
Wow, that's wonderful.
I wouldn't recommend building a house. I mean, it was great. It was a lot of fun in terms of working with the architect and shopping, and my wife and I did a lot of stuff together, and you know, but a lot of decision making, and it's neat to see the house going up, but it took a lot out of me, and I, for years, had nightmares about stuff at the house and things going wrong and leaks and whatever. And
It's worked
still
out well.
stressful.
It's a beautiful house.
Thank you, thank you.
And you're happy in the community in
Yes.
Nafayalan.
Yes, lovely community.
The schooling for your kids was good.
So the school is right, that's one of the big things, the schools are right here. The elementary schools are here, the high schools are here, the kids walk to school. In high school, usually they came home for lunch. My son ended up going to Yeshiva in Yerushalayim for high school, but for elementary and middle school he was here. So that's just really nice, having the schools right here.
And it's very close to Modi'in, and you're very close to the... You're right in the middle of the country.
So yeah,
Close to Yerushalayim, close to
we're centrally located in the middle of nowhere, because it's a little bit hard to get
But
to.
you have a country atmosphere. And
Exactly.
it's
It's nice.
beautiful.
There are cows not too far away. On a good day or on a bad day, you can smell them, depending on how you look at it. But it's nicely located. Modi'in's was initially hard to get to. It's a lot easier now. But you're right, Yerushalayim is 35 kilometers, Tel Aviv is 50. And the airport we can do a round trip to the airport in an hour.
Wow.
Which is
Amazing.
also really nice if somebody's coming in or if we have to take somebody to the airport. So it's really nice being that close to the airport as well.
And Aaron, can I just mention you got a job with Intel?
So initially I worked for a company called Ness in Tel Aviv for about 3 years. Um, the commute there was miserable in terms of
With the traffic.
the traffic. I was spending 2.5 hours a day in the car. So I started looking for something that was easier to get to and pay was better, and I lucked into a job at Intel. So I was at Intel in Yerushalayim for about 7.5 years, doing various things. Intel really isn't a software company. They make chips, and they don't do a great job of software. So I moved to what is now McAfee in Kfar Saba. At the time it was part of Intel, and then they got spun out of Intel.
This is the antiviral.
Well, we did something different. I mean, that's what everybody knows them for, is the antivirus stuff. But they do a lot of stuff. And what we did was database security, and that was very nice in terms of the people I was working with and the product we were doing, and everything was right there in that office. And I was really quite happy. I was there for about 2.5 years. And then about a year ago, they decided to close that office and move the product to Ireland. And so I had to go find another job. And so since June, I've been working for a small company. I actually went back into the startup world. But this is, they seem to understand that, 60-hour weeks are not the thing. And so I'm in Tel Aviv. I take the train every morning to Hashalom and walk 7 minutes to my office. And I take the train back. So it's really nice. And not having to drive is, I see all the traffic. It's like I wouldn't want to drive to Tel Aviv. So that's what I'm doing.
And can I ask, when you first started in computer science way back, did you ever envisage this whole future that was going to blossom, and the internet and laptops and cell phones, and did you have any conception that
no clue.
Your field was going to be the future?
No, I had no clue. I wasn't a visionary. There were people that were visionary like that.
Well, just choosing to go into computer science at an early stage, I think it's a tremendous visionary that you had. It was a good decision.
Yeah, it was a good decision, but I don't think it was visionary. It was just, it was fun and the opportunity to do something that was enjoyable and worth doing and interesting.
So this whole explosion, I mean, it's to look back from the early 90s and today and how it's changed the world.
Yeah.
Took you also by surprise?
It's been small steps. I guess didn't think about it a whole lot. I was busy doing what I was doing and writing books and raising family and just trying to, be an Oleh and things like that. So we're sort of Luddites. We didn't have a TV in the States because we felt like that was the wrong thing to have in our house. We got a TV when we made Aliyah, but for videotapes and later for discs. We don't watch Israeli television. We didn't give our kids cell phones until they were in the middle of high school.
Wow, that's...
because we felt that the life skills are much more important, because as soon as you've got the phone, you become dependent on it.
That's so true.
And I see zillions of people
so
walking
true.
around with their nose in the phone,
That's
and
so
it's
true.
like they could step out in front of a truck, and they just totally tune out the world. And so it's wonderful all that you can do, but it's also, we're now super dependent on our phones and on our computers, and we don't know how to think anymore.
And your kids were okay? Not, I'm sure all their friends had?
They were pretty much okay. I think they understood the reasons why. My son got a phone younger because he was commuting to Yerushalayim, but even then, initially they only got just phones.
Yeah, not with the...
Not fancy smartphones. I didn't get a smartphone, a real smartphone for myself until 3 or 4 years ago, and I got it from work. This is the this was the low end free phone,
Wow.
so I had no choice but to take a smartphone. So the truth is, now I like it. The WhatsApp and Waze are the two big killer apps, but I don't walk around with those in my phone. Um, and I just feel sorry for people that do.
It's true, they're missing out tremendously when newspapers, when you go on a train and you see people just glued to their phones, and you've got a good point. It's true. The jokes where you actually see people having a book and people looking, what are you doing? How come you don't have a phone? Wow, so Aaron, it's been fascinating, your story, and it's such a success. Your Aliyah has been a tremendous success, and your Derek, the way that you went. What advice would you give for potential people who are thinking of making Aliyah, coming to Israel, or those who are interested in going into the same field that you went into, computer science? Is there any message or advice you could give?
Okay, well, for Aliyah, Aliyah is like getting married. You want to date a little bit, get to know what you're getting into. It's not one of these pie in the sky things. You get off the plane in Israel and everything's perfect and heavenly choruses are singing and stuff like that. You want to understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
You want to have a command of Hebrew or be willing to get it. Because to live here, I think, without the ability to speak the language is possible, but very difficult. And particularly if you want to go to work, you can't. You can, but it's in high tech maybe work without a command of Hebrew. But
it helps. It definitely.
But it's going to be hard because Intel, for example, Intel is probably the marquee high-tech company, right? Everybody looks ooh, but Intel, so all your emails are in English, even among the Israelis, but you're sitting in meetings, all the meetings are in Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to be able to talk about what you want to do and tell this guy know why he's wrong and whatever, and you can do that speaking English, but you've got to at least understand the Hebrew that the guy's telling you. And certainly somebody, and I worked with somebody who was a lot older in Intel. He was already in his late 60s. So he understood Hebrew and he spoke to a certain extent, but in meetings he would often just speak in English. So I think people here make allowances for somebody that's, in their 60s to speak English, but somebody that's in their 30s and 40s to speak English, or early 50s, I'm not going to make those allowances. And so the language is important. If you have children, you want to make Aliyah while they're young. It's very hard to make Aliyah with teenagers. And you need to understand that it's a different culture and a different world. It's not.
And you have no regrets about coming to Israel?
Regrets is a very strong word, but it's very difficult having our family, our parents and siblings and so on in the States.
Have any followed?
My wife has a brother here in Yerushalayim, but all the rest of our family is still in the States.
It's like many families, yeah.
And my wife goes back to take care of her father. Her mother was nifter about a year ago. She travels to the States 3 or 4 times a year.
Yeah, it's not easy.
So I'm fortunate that my parents are, Baruch Hashem, in good health, and I have 2 siblings in Atlanta, 2 brothers. So I don't have to do that. But I'm very fortunate I don't have to do that.
And your family comes to visit you often?
Well, not so much now. My parents are up in age, and it's hard for them to travel. My nieces, my brother's kids, come here every so often, and one or the other shows up. We just had one of them came on birthright and then spent a week with us, which was a lot of fun. So, and occasionally a cousin or somebody else will show up here.
And Aaron, can I ask, did any of your children follow in your footsteps in the computer science field?
No.
You didn't encourage, or you didn't?
We wanted to let them go their own way, and if any of them had wanted to, that'd have been great. But we felt like we should.
They must make their own decisions.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I think you've had a tremendously successful career and your aliyah, which is a very big part. It's relocating, and it's a major adjustment in one's life. But you've done it incredibly well, and with tremendous chokhmah, with a lot of insight and a lot of preparation.
Everybody makes mistakes. It's not like I certainly didn't get off the plane and everything goes smoothly, you know. But, okay. Baruch Hashem.
But you have a wonderful attitude, and I think that really does help. And it's just been such a pleasure to meet you, and we just hope you should have mazel and bracha, and be an example that we can all look up to. Really.
Thank you.
It's been such a pleasure.
Okay. Let's pause.